The collapse of American democracy. Can South Korea survive? Hello, listeners. Today we're going to talk about an uncomfortable truth that no one dares to speak about. For the past 80 years, America has been the lighthouse of freedom and democracy. But at this moment, in August 2025, that lighthouse is shaking. Or perhaps it has already begun to crumble. Trump has become president again. On his first day in office alone, he issued 26 executive orders. This is the highest number in history. And according to expert analysis, 2/3 of these measures align with the so-called Project 2025, an authoritarian blueprint. At the same time, discussions about withdrawing US forces from Korea are actually taking place in Washington. While there has been no official announcement yet, several media outlets, including the Wall Street Journal, have reported on the possibility of 4,500 US troops withdrawing from Korea. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not just news. This is a matter directly related to our survival. Today we will face the harsh reality. If America really collapses, what will happen to Korea? Can we survive on our own? We will find the answer to this question together. Chapter 1. Real Signs of American Democracy's Collapse. Ladies and gentlemen, first, there's one thing we need to make clear. The crisis of American democracy is no longer a hypothesis. It is a reality happening at this very moment. On January 6, 2021, we witnessed protesters breaking into the US Capitol building. In over 200 years of American democratic history, nothing like this had ever happened. But this was just the beginning. In 2025, Trump has seized power again, and his actions are horrifying democracy experts. According to the VDEM Institute, a democracy research organization, in 2024, there were more authoritarian countries than democratic countries in the world. This means that 40% of the world's population lives in countries that are becoming autocratic. America is no exception. Trump has invoked more emergency powers in his first 100 days than any president in history. Border emergency, energy emergency, economic emergency. Are all of these really emergencies? To add a somewhat cynical perspective here, most of these emergencies are means to bypass Congress and push through policies the president wants. The exact same method used by Hungary's Orbán and Turkey's Erdogan. The media environment is also serious. Fox News and Truth Social represent one extreme, while CNN and MSNBC represent the other extreme, and Americans are living in completely different realities. This goes beyond simple media bias to the collapse of the information ecosystem. What's even more shocking is that polling shows more than 1/3 of Americans are actually concerned about the possibility of civil war. This is the reality of America in 2025. So what does this change in America mean for Korea? If the protector we've depended on for over 70 years is changing, what should we do? Chapter 2. Global shock. If America collapses from within. Looking back at history, empires have fallen more often from internal collapse than external invasion. This was true of the Roman Empire, and it was true of the Soviet Union. And now America may be walking the same path. If America collapses internally, the first thing to happen will be a return to isolationism. The signs are already visible. Trump temporarily suspended military aid to Ukraine, then resumed it conditionally. He set conditions that Ukraine agree to a potential ceasefire and compensate America with half of its oil and minerals. This is exactly what an isolationist America looks like. An America that prioritizes its own interests over global problems. What about the defense budget? If America becomes mired in internal conflict, overseas deployment costs will be the first targets for cuts. Reports have already emerged that Washington is discussing plans to withdraw 4,500 US troops from Korea. While the Pentagon has denied this, Where there's smoke, there's usually fire. What about NATO? Trump already strongly demanded increased defense spending from NATO member countries during his first term. This time, he's likely to actually withdraw US troops. To add a somewhat cynical perspective here, American alliances were actually tools for American interests. 30 years after the Soviet collapse, NATO and Asian alliances are beginning to be seen as burdens for America, especially as it begins to lose economically to China. The economic ripple effects will be even more serious. If dollar hegemony is shaken, the global financial system will fall into chaos. This would be a shock incomparable to the 1971 Nixon shock or the 2008 financial crisis. And the most frightening thing is the power vacuum. If America withdraws, who will fill that space? China, Russia, Iran. These authoritarian countries are waiting. Russia has already invaded Ukraine, China is applying pressure in the Taiwan Strait, and Iran is expanding its influence in the Middle East. If America collapses, there will be no country capable of stopping their ambitions. The European Union? It doesn't yet have integrated military power. Japan? It has constitutional constraints on peace. India? It doesn't yet have such global capacity. Ultimately, the world is likely to enter a new dark age, and Korea sits in the middle of that chaos. Chapter 3. Korea without America. The worst-case scenario. Now let's imagine a truly frightening scenario. Imagine one morning you turned on the news and saw this breaking report. US announces complete withdrawal of forces from Korea, considering termination of ROK-US Mutual Defense Treaty. Is this just imagination? Unfortunately, it's not. Trump already told Kim Jong-un during the 2019 Hanoi, North Korea-US summit that he would someday like to withdraw US troops from Korea. The possibility of this becoming reality in his second term is higher than ever. If US forces withdraw, the first thing to happen will be an acceleration of North Korean provocations. Kim Jong-un has already strengthened relations with Russia and even dispatched troops to the Ukraine war. This means North Korea is no longer an isolated country. It means it has a powerful patron in Russia. Why would North Korea stay quiet on a Korean peninsula without US forces? The risk of a second Korean war would rise dramatically. And this time, unlike 1950, North Korea has nuclear weapons. What about Japan? If America withdraws from East Asia, Japan will naturally move toward military normalization. The Kishida government has already announced plans to increase defense spending to 2% of GDP. US withdrawal would accelerate this further. The problem is that Japan's militarization could become a new threat to Korea. Dokdo issues, comfort women issues, forced labor issues, these historical conflicts could lead to military tensions. To add a somewhat cynical perspective here, Northeast Asia is the most complex geopolitical conflict region in the world. Korea and Japan, Korea and China, Japan and China. All relationships are entangled with historical resentments. If America as mediator disappears, this region will become a powder keg. What about China? Beijing has already pressured Korea to withdraw THAAD deployment. If US forces withdraw, China may more openly demand Korea's neutrality, or even alliance. Korea's options are very limited. First, entering China's sphere of influence. Second, strengthening military cooperation with Japan. Third, developing independent nuclear weapons. The third would break the NPT system. The first would mean abandoning liberal democracy, and the second is a difficult choice given public sentiment. Economically, Korea's defense budget would explode. Currently at 2.8% of GDP, it could rise to 5 to 6%, like Israel. Military service periods would also lengthen, and economic growth rates would slow. Korea's economy is highly export-dependent. If the world falls into chaos, our economy will also take a direct hit. If global supply chains collapse, semiconductor exports will also suffer. This is what Korea without America looks like. All options are bad, and the future is uncertain. Chapter 4. Hidden Systems. Korea depends on America. 4. Ladies and gentlemen, if you think Korea's relationship with America is simply about the 28,500 US troops, you're greatly mistaken. In reality, thousands of invisible threads connect the two countries. And the moment these threads are cut, Korea will truly be alone. Let's start with information systems. Korea's Missile Defense System, KAMD, Korean Air and Missile Defense, depends on US satellite intelligence and radar data. When North Korea launches a missile, the first to detect it are US early warning satellites. This information must be transmitted to Korea in real time for interception to be possible. What about the THAAD system? This is a system operated entirely by US forces. Korean forces cannot even access it. If US forces withdraw, THAAD disappears with them. Intelligence networks are the same. Korea is not included in the so-called Five Eyes: US, UK, Canada, Australia, New Zealand. Intelligence sharing network, but has separate intelligence sharing agreements with the US. We obtain information about North Korea and China's movements, Russian military intelligence, and even Japan's military trends through America. To add a somewhat cynical perspective here, information is power. And in exchange for giving Korea information, America also takes Korea's information. Korea's human intelligence, HUMINT, on North Korea, economic intelligence on China, and even Korean companies' technological information. This isn't one-sided help, but mutual trade. Economic systems are even more complex. Korea's semiconductor industry depends on US core technologies. ASML's EUV equipment, Applied Materials deposition equipment, Lam Research's etching equipment, all of these are under US control. If America turned hostile toward Korea, it could block technology exports to Korea, just like semiconductor export restrictions on China. Then Samsung Electronics and SK Hynix would no longer be able to make cutting-edge semiconductors. Financial systems are the same. Korea's major banks are all connected to the US financial system. International remittances through the SWIFT system, dollar liquidity supply, US Treasury investments. If America imposed financial sanctions on Korea, we could be isolated from the global financial system like Russia. Technology standards are also important. 5G, 6G communication standards, semiconductor design standards, even internet protocols are all led by America. If Korea were excluded from these standards, we would be technologically isolated. Educational and research cooperation cannot be overlooked. Korea's major universities have active exchanges with US universities, joint research, student exchange, faculty exchange. If all of this were cut off, Korea's academic level would drop sharply. Finally, there's psychological dependence. Koreans have perceived America as a protector for over 70 years. Whenever there was a North Korean threat, we believed America would protect us. If this psychological dependence disappeared overnight, the entire society would fall into great confusion. These are the hidden systems Korea depends on America for. What's visible is just the tip of the iceberg. Chapter 5. Republic of Korea. Identity Crisis. Ladies and gentlemen, if you were suddenly asked this question, how would you answer? What kind of country is the Republic of Korea without America? Most Koreans would probably be confused, because for over 70 years we have formed our identity only as the Republic of Korea, an ally of America. Since the 1953 armistice, all of Korea's national strategies have been established with America as a premise. Security depends on US forces, the economy depends on the US market, and diplomacy is based on cooperation with America. Even our political system modeled American-style democracy. In this situation, if America suddenly disappeared, Korea would face a fundamental identity crisis. This is not a simple policy change, but an existential crisis. What would be the reaction of young people? Today's 20 to 30-year-olds grew up in a world where America existed from birth. To them, America was a given. K-pop reaching the Billboard charts, Korean films winning Academy Awards, Korean companies advancing into Silicon Valley. All of this was possible within the relationship with America. If America disappeared, the meaning of this Korean wave would also change. Should we depend more on the Chinese market? Or should we turn our eyes to Europe or Southeast Asia? The meaning of military service would also change. Until now, Korean men's military service was about deterring North Korea together with US forces. But without US forces, it becomes facing North Korea alone. This has a completely different meaning. To add a somewhat cynical perspective here, Korean politicians have until now passed all difficult decisions to America. THAAD deployment, America demanded it. Military intelligence protection agreement with Japan, America mediated it. Conflict with China, America has our back. Without America, Korean politicians must decide for themselves, and they must also take full responsibility for those decisions. Are they prepared? The education system would also fall into chaos. Until now, Korea's education has been Western-oriented education centered on English. US university admission, employment at US companies. These were the standards of success. Without America, we must set new educational goals. Should we learn Chinese? Or Japanese? Indonesian? Arabic? No one knows which language will be useful in the future. Religious identity would also be affected. Korean Protestantism took root through American missionaries. Many Korean churches are connected to American denominations. If relations with America deteriorated, what choices would Korean churches have to make? The media is the same. Until now, Korean media has viewed the world from America's perspective. We've simply accepted the views of Western media, like CNN, BBC, and the New York Times. Without America, Korean media must develop an independent perspective. But is this possible? Or will we become dependent on other major power media like China's CGTN or Russia's RT? The most serious thing is generational conflict. The older generation takes the alliance with America for granted, but the younger generation may be different. Especially perceptions of unification differ by generation. Should we pursue unification even without America? Or would maintaining the status quo be better? Korean society has not yet prepared answers to these fundamental questions. This is the identity crisis the Republic of Korea will face. The moment the spiritual pillar we've depended on for 70 years disappears, we must find a completely new self. Chapter 6. Can Korea survive without America? Now, it's time to answer the most important question. Can Korea really survive without America? I'll give you the conclusion first. It's possible. But it won't be easy, and we would have to become a completely different country from what we are now. The first condition is dramatically strengthening our own defense capabilities. Currently, Korea's defense spending is at 2.8% of GDP. We need to raise this to at least 4 to 5%, as Israel does. It's not just about increasing money. We also need technological independence. Currently, Korea's major weapons systems depend on US technology. F-35 fighters, Patriot missiles, Apache helicopters. We need to independently develop or build systems that can replace all of these. Fortunately, Korea already possesses considerable technological capabilities. KF-21 fighters, Cheonggung missiles, Suryan helicopters. While not perfect, we have a foundation. The second condition is building balanced diplomacy. Instead of depending only on America, we must build balanced relationships with multiple major powers. The European Union could be an important partner. Germany, France, and Britain are all democratic countries while conducting diplomacy independent of America. Especially in defense technology, Europe is at a level comparable to America. India is also a partner worth noting. India is the world's largest democracy while maintaining independent relationships with America, China, and Russia. Korea must also learn this strategic autonomy. We must also strengthen relationships with ASEAN countries. Indonesia, Vietnam, Thailand all maintain independent lines while checking Chinese influence. To add a somewhat cynical perspective here, diplomacy is a game of interests, not emotions. For Korea to build good relationships with other countries, we must have something to give them. Economic benefits, technological cooperation, security value. These things. The third condition is economic diversification. Currently, Korea's economy is too dependent on China. China accounts for 25% of total exports. This is dangerous. We must develop new markets in India, Southeast Asia, the Middle East, Africa, and South America. Especially India is likely to surpass China and become the world's largest market in the future. We must also become technologically independent. While Korea is strong in semiconductors, we still depend on Japan, the Netherlands, and America for materials, parts, and equipment. We must reduce this dependence. The fourth condition is strengthening national psychological resilience. This may be the most difficult part. Koreans tend to think of themselves as a small country. But looking at reality, this isn't true. Korea is the world's 10th largest economy and has the 6th strongest military. With a population of 50 million, we rank 28th in the world. We are by no means a small country. The education system must also change. We must move away from English-only education and learn various languages and cultures. Especially, we must increase understanding of the languages and cultures of Asian countries. The fifth condition is strengthening internal integration. Without America as an external protector, internal cohesion in Korean society becomes even more important. We must heal internal divisions like regional conflicts, generational conflicts, and ideological conflicts. A divided society cannot survive in moments of crisis. Finally, we may need to seriously consider whether to develop nuclear weapons. This is a very sensitive issue, but it may be an unavoidable choice. With North Korea having nuclear weapons, and China and Russia also having nuclear weapons, can Korea alone survive without nuclear weapons? Consider why France and Britain developed independent nuclear weapons. Of course, this would break the NPT system and require accepting international sanctions. But if survival is at stake, we must consider all options. In conclusion, Korea can survive without America. But to do so, we must become a completely different country from what we are now. A stronger, more independent, and more realistic country. Closing. Time for awakening. Ladies and gentlemen, today we have faced uncomfortable truths together. That American democracy is shaking, that Korea is overly dependent on America, and that this dependence may someday end. Some of you may think this discussion is overly pessimistic. Would America really collapse so easily? Surely the ROC-US alliance won't end, you might say. But remember, History is full of surely nots. Surely the Soviet Union won't collapse. Surely Yugoslavia won't break apart. Surely the Arab Spring won't fail. Surely Brexit won't pass. Surely Trump won't be elected. All the surely nots became reality, and now another surely not lies before us. To add one final cynical perspective, Korean society tends to react very slowly to change. This was true during the 1997 foreign exchange crisis and the 2008 financial crisis. We only began responding hastily when crisis was right in front of us. I hope this time will be different. Before the American umbrella disappears, we must prepare not to get wet ourselves. So what should we do? First, we must face reality. America is not eternal. Empires inevitably fall. This is a law of history. Second, we must shift our thinking from dependence to independence. From America will protect us to we must protect ourselves. Third, we must see the wider world. America is not everything. There's Europe, India, and Southeast Asia. Fourth, we must strengthen our internal capabilities. Military power, economic power, technological power, and above all, spiritual power. Fifth, we must prepare for the future. We must imagine the world 10 and 20 years from now, and think about how Korea will survive in that world. Finally, please don't despair. Crisis is also opportunity. If we survive without American protection, Korea will become a truly independent nation. A proud middle power that no longer bows to anyone. Korea is a country that has made the impossible possible. We leapt from one of the world's poorest countries in the 1960s to a developed nation in the 2020s. We grew from the ruins of the Korean War to become a K-culture powerhouse. We have that power. The power to turn crisis into opportunity, despair into hope. What's important is awakening now. Whether Korea will collapse together when America falls, or walk a new path of independence, depends on what decisions we make now. Before that day comes, we must be prepared. As a proud Republic of Korea that is not afraid of being alone. Thank you sincerely for listening to today's episode to the end. Today's content may have been uncomfortable, but sometimes uncomfortable truths make us stronger. If this kind of in-depth analysis and realistic perspective has been helpful, please hit the subscribe button and let us know your thoughts in the comments. I want to think about a better future together with you. Thank you.